Okay, good evening, everybody. It is 7 o'clock. We are excited to have you here at the pork evaluation food safety session here at the new Meat Science building, the Meat Science Animal and make sure I get this right, Biologics Discovery Building. So we're here tonight and we're going to go through a number of things with you. We would like to go through just a few slides in terms of kind of keeping the Zoom room tidy. Please put your questions in the Q&A section on the bottom of the Zoom. Please do that. That helps us out with all things organization. We know you'll have lots of questions and we want to get to as many as we can. Please put your questions there and not in the chat if at all possible. We're looking forward to a great evening, so that all starts out with being able to make sure you're listening and leaving the chat alone and asking great questions, okay? So we are on our third grand challenge. It's March 3rd. We're on food and meat safety, and please do follow up on April 14th and May 12th for our remaining 2 challenges. You can receive county educational credit for this evening. That is, there's a link in the email that you guys would have received that will give you access to that verification form. Hopefully you took the time to do that this evening before you got on, and we will remind you again in remaining emails of where that is located on the website. Please don't hesitate to check out our websites and other social media to keep abreast of what is going on in the youth livestock area. And then one remaining thing, when you leave the Zoom this evening, when you close the room, it will take you to a Qualtrics survey. And completing this survey is really helpful for us. It provides us the ability to know what you gained and learned from this experience, but also what other things you might be interested in learning more about that we can focus on. So please go ahead when you're done this evening and make sure you fill that out. That helps us out a lot. All right, so I'm going to stop sharing that, and I'm going to jump over to the pigs that we, let's see if we can find it here. Okay, so this evening we had a number of pigs that we looked at them live. Okay, so thank you to UW Platteville for being able to do that for us. We had this white crossbred market hog that was from UW Platteville. It was probably the pig of the 3 that had the most trimness. You can see across and behind its shoulder blades, it was pretty trimmed, and from the top shape and the ham, there was quite a bit of muscle width and dimension. So that would be a pig that we would characterize as probably one. When we look at them on the carcass, on the rail, that would probably have quite a bit of muscle. And probably the most trimness. So we'll see here if that yields true. The red pig here that we had was a pig that, if you could see right behind its shoulders, it was filling in just a little bit more fat right behind its elbow there as it's walking away, and just really didn't have the amount of flare in its muscle dimension on its top as compared to the white pig. This pig is also a bit lighter weight. Its live weight was just a bit lighter. Okay, and then our last pig was this black Berkshire pig. So Berkshire pigs are generally known for high marbling, really giving that Berkshire Gold program the opportunity to provide really tender and juicy flavor pork. And so we added this pig in this group for that particular reason, to see how would that work out. And so this pig, again, has a little bit more fat, as you can see right down its top. It's filling right behind its shoulder, and even a little bit where it's in its hand-loin junction in the back. And typically this breed, generally speaking, of course, can carry a bit more condition. So we'll see what these look like here as we focus the camera over to the pork carcass. So those are the 3 pigs, and all of these videos will be online for you to view at a later time with more details about evaluation. All right, so if Jordan wants to put on the camera, we're going to go over to the pork carcasses. So the pork carcasses that we are only using one half, you're seeing one half of this side right now. The other sides are on the table that we're going to actually go through the cuts here in a minute. In a pork carcass evaluation, I'm not going to go through the details of the pieces and parts and the primals tonight. We're going to go through that here in the tables, but also there will be a more explicit video online that will go through some of those details. Okay. So this is the red pig. So if you remember from the little video, this pig weighed 230 pounds live and had 167.5 carcass weight, hot carcass weight. So when we measured these pork carcasses, you take a ruler and you measure a third of the way or 3/4 of the way up the long side of the loin eye. Thanks, Jeff, for grabbing my materials. And then we also capture the loin muscle area of the loin area here. Okay. We do this between the 10th and 13th rib. We rib them between the 10th and 13th rib. 10th and 11th, what did I say?
10th and 13th.
Sorry, yeah, that'd be a lot of ribs. So 10th and 11th, okay? And so we measure that, and you can see that's about 9/10. And we put the ribeye area, grid, and count dots.
Loin eye.
Loin eye, what did I say?
Ribeye.
Ribeye, loin eye. Thanks, Jeff.
You're welcome.
And then we count dots. So on average, when we talk about those kinds of things, you know, loin eye area would be roughly 6 to, we could be up to 11 square inches. This one is 6, or at least that's what I measured. Might be a couple tenths off, but in general, not very big. Okay, so the red pig kind of showed us not a lot of muscle, so that kind of holds true and certainly does have some condition. And then the last thing we capture is a muscle score, and that's the plumpness and width and dimension of the ham in relation to the rest of the body. And so the rest of the carcass. And in this case, we gave this one a 2. Okay. The other thing we captured here on the carcass is color, firmness, and marbling. So when you look at the loin surface, we capture a color score, a firmness, and a marbling. The color, ranges from 1 to 6. I think in this case, I gave it a 3.
1.
Okay. Firmness generally are measured on 1 to 3 scale. And you can look at this carcass and it's pretty firm. So I left it as a 3. Okay. And then marbling is 1 to 10. And marbling there's a 1 that's basically virtually no marbling. And I think with these, I put it at a 3 or a 2. That's roughly about the amount of marbling in this particular carcass. Okay? And marbling goes all the way to 10, which is chocked full. It would be kind of one of those Wagyu type percent fat. And certainly all those flexes of fat provide flavor and juiciness. Okay. So let's move on down to the next pig. This is the white crossbred pig. This is the one that weighed 240 pounds live, had 182.5 carcass weight. When we did the measurements on this one, this was appreciatively the trimmer, one of the group, as we saw live. We guesstimated that to be correct. It had 6/10. And the loin muscle area between the 10th and 11th was a 10.2 square inch loin eye. So much heavier muscle, as we saw in the video. And then when you look at this carcass from the muscle score view, it's definitely got that more expression and plumpness to its ham. So that's a muscle score of 3. Okay. And then we'll end with the Berkshire. So this is the Berkshire pig, the all black pig with some white spots, or not spots, white points. Weighed 245, had a hot carcass weight of 187.5. And this pig was the fattest of the group, 1.2 square or 1.2 inches of back fat. And in this case, it had a 7.0 square inch loin muscle area. So a pig in this particular case that had a lot of fat, but had more muscle. So this pig also received a 3 muscle score as well. So just to end with some comments here, and then we'll pass it to our speakers, is that in these 3 carcasses here, we had 2 carcasses that had percent fat rating of about 50%. And that would be the red pig and the black pig. So they did it in different ways, right? The red pig was lighter, which really helps percent lean, but it was fat and light, which didn't help it out. And this pig was heavier, which doesn't normally help percent lean, but it had more muscle, which was helpful, but the back fat certainly wasn't. And so you compare those 2 pigs with kind of the rock star in the middle, and this pig had roughly a 65% lean. So when you compare these, really that trimness and extra muscle really helps the cutability of pigs. Okay, so we get more pounds of product out of this pig than we would, or more pounds of milk muscle and meat than we would the other two sides in this case. So we'll really see that when we go to the tables. So I'm going to pass this on to our speakers. Our first speaker, we have Dr. Jeff Sindelar. So Dr. Jeff is our unit in Madison Beef Science Extension Specialist. And then we have, go Badgers, right? And then we have Jim Murray. Jim Murray is an executive chef. So he's a certified executive chef and did that for a number of years. And then is now works with the National Book and does a lot of board sessions and gains a lot of experience through short courses and others to teach others. So we're so glad to have them with us today. We spent the afternoon preparing these tables, so I'm so excited to have them here, and thank you so much. So I'll pass this over to you guys.
Well, good evening, everybody. We're excited to talk about pork and organizing this event and making this opportunity available for everybody. But also spending some time not only with the live validation, but also with the carcass validation, because to really become an expert in pork, you really need to understand all the different fats. Fats is not just one part. So having the opportunity to look at the live animals and then the carcasses is a very powerful means of evaluating, understanding.
Hey, Jeff, this is Jim. Can you hear me?
So,
Jeff or Bernie, can you hear me?
After we worked with Bernie, fabricating 3 different sides.
Bernie.
And they are the other sides of all 3 carcasses.
The mic isn't working.
First one, and it just broken it down into the main farmer cuts. Jim, would you like to walk through? Sure. About the different farmer cuts?
Someone said it's not working.
Yeah, so Jeff or Bernie, you got to talk closer to the mic.
They said they're having a hard time hearing you, so hold it close.
Okay. The front leg, the head was up here, and so we have the front leg is the first primal, and we move to the loin. So you have your loin back here, your tenderloin here, and your loin back ribs. This is the belly, and on top of the belly rests the spare ribs. So this is a full set of spares. And underneath is the belly, which
traditionally is crafted into bacon. And the leg, often referred to as the ham, once it's been processed as the ham. How do people prepare these items? So we separate the leg into two parts called subbridles. This is the picnic section. This is a trotter. And this is a Boston butt. Most people are like, well, why isn't the butt on the back end? They used to cure these or put these into salt and ship them. And the lug of salt was called a butt. So these are great for roasting, smoking, slow cooking. It's a heavy activity muscle, and so it tends to have a lot of pH, meaning water holding capacity, moisture, but a perfect fat to lean ratio of about 70% lean meat to 30% fat, so it makes it good for sausage making as well. This little piece here was attached right there, and it's the jowl. It's basically like your jawline. Yep. And you can cure these, smoke them, roast them, treat them just like they would treat bacon.
That has to be really close. Has to be close, yeah.
So here, once again, full spare, meaning that there's a set of cartilage right along here. If you cut that off, what's left here is St. Louis style ribs. Great for smoking, grilling, roasting. Got this little part that's set up on top of here. This is neck bones. So these are great for stewing, putting into ragouts. So you can smoke them. You could even put them on a bandsaw and cut them into little rib-sized pieces for appetizers. Once again, we talked about the belly being used in many different applications now. People are braising it, meaning cooking it in a liquid. People smoke it, people cure it, and make bacon out of it. It's one of the more popular cuts. Loin, on the back side of the loin is the loin muscle itself. These are not baby back ribs, they're loin back ribs. Baby back was a marketing campaign by Chili's that coined that phrase. This is the most tender muscle in the entire animal. It's the tenderloin. That is because it rests inside the abdominal cavity and simply kind of gives support to the back of the pig that doesn't do a whole lot of work. Here's the tail. And oftentimes we'd be like, what do you do with tails? A lot of the internal organs and odds and ends, maybe it's ears, maybe it's tails, feet. These are shipped outside the United States to various countries around the world and or made into different items that we can talk when we get to the next table. Here's a fresh leg, often referred to as a green ham. And it's what, Dr. Sindelar, there are about 9 muscles in the leg, something around that. And when we get over to the cutout table, we'll show you 3 of those muscles. Some of the muscles are protected, but once again, you see very deep color. This is also a heavily worked muscle, but it's also very lean. And so it's often cured and made into hams, boned out and made into smaller hams, or you can make country style hams from this particular style. Go back over to this table. So what we've done at this table is taken another side. This came from that red pig, Duroc, and we thought it would be fun to show you what happens when you after you break a carcass down or side into primes and subprimes. Where does it go from there, right? And pork is historically known as a really, really versatile species, really, really versatile type of meat, because it has good flavor, it has good color, it does really well if you add spices, if you
put it on a smoker, if you grill it, if you do a variety of different applications. So it's a very, very versatile species. Very versatile type of meat, and so we can do lots of different things. If you take these primals and we say, well, where do they go from here, right? The main components of meat, right, or carcass are fat, lean, the meat portion, and bone. And oftentimes, manufacturers will take these cuts. They might make bone-in cuts, and Jim will show you a variety of these on the grill table. Or they may remove some or all those bones and make boneless cuts. Depending on the application and what consumers want, that's the direction. That's the direction that's taken. So, in order to make boneless or bone-in cuts, we first have to remove some of the things that consumers aren't willing to buy. And on these carcasses, we have to remove two things. One is the skin, and the second is excessive fat. And as Bernie explained with the three different carcasses that have all very much fat and muscling, that's important because that drives the value of those carcasses. The more fat that a carcass has, typically a packer or a processor is willing to give the farmer less money because that fat has to be typically discarded or used for a much lower value process, which consumers again are less likely to want to purchase. So here on this table is the exact same cutout, exact same process with the primals and subprimals, but in this case, Jim and I have gone one step further, and we've simply taken the skin off of these different primals and subprimals, and then we've trimmed the fat to the amount of fat that you would typically see left on these cuts when you as a consumer would purchase them. So this is the loin, right? The skin is removed, which you can see is just a very, very thin membrane, which is primarily collagen. This is actually used for a variety of different things, such as Jello, makeup, lots of different stuff. And then we remove the fat. So this whole pile over here, this was all the fat that came off of this loin. And you can see that's a lot of fat.
It's almost half of the loin.
Yep, there was almost an inch of fat on the outside of this loin, as Bernie showed by the measurement between the 10th and 11th rib. And a consumer doesn't want to eat an inch of fat. They don't want to buy an inch of fat. They want to buy the valued lean, which is what they're going to consume. So if we are a processor, packer or processor, after we remove the skin, we have to remove a lot of that fat, and thus we have a lot lower value loin from a carcass that has too much fat. We did the same process for the Boston butt, and there's less fat on the Boston butt. We did the same process for the shoulder picnic. Here's the pile of fat from that shoulder picnic. On there. We did the same process for the ham, and animals typically fatten from front to back, so from head to tail. And after removing the skin from the ham, we removed all the fat. And that's a fair amount of fat. So if you look at the entire table, right, and we actively look at how much fat we removed from that carcass that had almost an inch of fat measured between the 10th and 11th rib, there's a lot of stuff that consumers don't want to purchase or pay for. So it's really, really important to keep this in mind when you are raising hogs, providing animals that packers want to buy, and of course consumers want to purchase as well. Jim, you have anything to add?
Not on this. It's just interesting to see how much.
The question on the session was what's the process in processing skin to use in Jello and other things that you kind of described. Do you have a good guesstimate of how to?
it's heat and moisture. They would extract the natural gelatin that's in here. That's what they would use.
Yep. So generally, in a plant, when the skin, when this skin is removed, they use pieces of equipment specifically designed for doing that. They're called skinners, and they will leave very little fat on the skin, and the skin will just be a couple millimeters thick, and almost thin enough that you can see through it. That skin will then be collected, and then that skin will be sold to different manufacturers for using for different purposes. And as Jim mentioned, the important ingredient or the component of skin is collagen, and that's removed by typically heat and water, and sometimes there is some chemistry where they may add an acid or a base, so something that's acidic or alkaline, to change the structure of the collagen so that it will be able to be changed and formed into a different ingredient.
Also, there are many cultures, including here in the United States, that would eat this. So it could be pickled, in the case of Hispanic populations, or fried. And that's where you get your pork rinds. If they leave a little bit of the meat on, they would make cracklings out of them down south. So nothing on a pig ever goes to waste. 100% of pigs are utilized.
Yep. Skins historically in some countries have been used as a raw material for sausage making. So they'll add them into things like hot dog and so forth. Of course, in the U.S., if that happens, it has to be put onto the label. But skins have, as Jim alluded to, become popular for pet treats, right? Dog chews. And this is similar to like hog ears, or even in some cases tails. All right, let's move over to the other thing. Take it aside and cut it a little further down into more retail cuts to give you an idea of what the different wholesale price will then be compared to. And some of these hopefully will more familiar to you.
Okay, let's start again at the front of the animal. We already talked about the jowl, but here's just one that's been cleaned up a little bit nicer than the one that was on the primal table. This is a traditional style for barbecuing down in the south, picnic shoulder. Also bone that out for it's great material for sausage. And then what we did with the butt was put it on a bandsaw and do what the St. Louis would refer to as pork steaks. We often call them blade chops. So it's just a thick cut cross section of the butt itself. Lots of good muscles in that. Then if we move back to the loin, we separated off what they call the chine bone, or the backbone of the pig. Then we cut bone-in chops, 1.5 inch thick bone-in chops. So several years ago, we changed the nomenclature around chops. And so sometimes you would see this referred to as pork porterhouse. So it's got the loin here and the tenderloin right there. And as that tenderloin gets smaller, when it's no longer at least 1/2 inch on either side of that T-bone, then it moves into some ribeye chops, and you can tell that because it's got a separate muscle referred to as spinalis. And then once you get down towards where the shoulder picks up, you get these blade chops. Here's the belly once again, squared up and ready to go.
Yep. And the belly would of course be used for bacon. So Jim and I like to. This would be like a perfect family portrait if we were related. Right? So the bellies are really valuable. They are actually the most valuable cut in a pork carcass because this would be injected with a solution of salt and sugar and sodium nitrite and a couple other things, and then cooked and smoked, sliced, and then that would be created, and they would be transferred, and then that would be made into bacon.
And lastly, we have a rear leg where we separated out muscles. So like the inside of the pig's leg is referred to as inside. Sometimes when they used to butcher on tables like this, they would call this the top. And this is the bottom round. And this is the knuckle. And oftentimes these three are combined together with binding agents, usually like round bits and portions of the meat that would knit these together, and they would make a ham out of these muscles. Or you can make scallopinis. Notice this, very lean. Probably about 97% lean. Went down, here's a hock, or shank actually. The hock is the joint. Got some trim, several bones that came out of this. So these would be used for stocks and such. Pretty much it, I think, of this. Okay, sure.
Okay, so one of the questions is, so how much of the pig is fat in like a percentage? You guys want to answer that? I mean, obviously, generally speaking, because as you can tell here on the pigs that we saw here, it's going to be different depending on the pig.
Yep, so if a live hog, let's say, weighs 300 pounds, when you harvest them, you remove the internal organs, the head, some other parts, and you usually lose about 30%. So hogs will dress, it's called dressing percentage, about 70%. So you have about 210-pound carcass. That's two sides. We have one side on the table right now. So we have, if we started out with a 300-pound hog, we would have about a 105-pound side. If we had an average yield grade, right, about 8.8%, about 0.7 inches of fat, and about a 7-inch eye, right, that Bernie showed, the measure between the 10th and 11th rib, we may have 55 to 60% yield. So that means about half or a little bit more of lean, and that's after removing all the fat and all the bone. So we might have on this table about 45 to 50 pounds of edible meat, maybe a little bit more.
Okay. Another question is, there's quite a few here, so I'll try and get the first one first. Was the fat, did we weigh the fat from that one table to know how much total fat came from that one side of carcass? Did we do that? No, we did not.
Okay.
We thought about it and we decided that we weren't going to do that. But maybe we'll do that later and we'll email everybody. Okay. Is there a guideline for how much fat is left on chopped steaks in the store? That's a great question.
I think standard is quarter of an inch, and it kind of depends on the butcher shop as well as the, if it's a beautiful chop, you might leave a little bit more on, but I would say on average it's a quarter of an inch.
Okay, let's maybe do one more question, then we'll move to the next stop. Just going through here. What cuts are used to make brats and sausages? And another one is hot dogs. So we didn't really talk too much about trim, but yeah.
Yep, great question. So generally, trimmings are used to make hot dogs and sausages and bratwurst. And the trimmings are all the parts and pieces that aren't usable or rarely usable for the normal cuts. So when we cut the loin into pork chops, we utilize almost all of that loin into the chops. When we remove the loin from the belly, we may have a little bit of extra trim, such as this, right? When we take the ham apart into different pieces, we can generate a little bit of trimmings. When we take the trotter or the shank off, we have some trimmings. So all these small amounts of trimmings throughout the entire carcass are all collected, and that's what is normally used for making sausage. However, if there's a lot of demand, then some of these other cuts are used for making sausage. So it's very common to take picnic shoulders and, in some cases, Boston butts. So the shoulder part of the carcass, and utilize those into trimmings that are used for sausages, frankfurters, bratwurst, and so forth.
One more question while Jim is kind of preparing the next part is, how do you compare
Well, that's an excellent question. So probably about 98% of all the hogs harvested in the U.S. Are harvested with the skin left on. Many and most, I should say most small processors will actually skin the hogs. So when they're harvesting the hogs, they will take a knife and actually peel the skin, leaving the hair on, so that the carcasses only have fat and no longer have the skin. Large operations, large plants, medium and large plants, and some small plants will do what we did, which is we leave the skin on. So after the hogs are stunned, after they're bled, so right, we remove all their blood, which is how the animals, in this case hogs, pass away. Then the hogs go into a hot water bath, which is about 150 degrees Fahrenheit. They spend about 5 minutes. That hot water will warm up and loosen the hair follicles, and then they go through a machine that kind of looks like a beater on a manure spreader for all you farm kids out there. So it has little rubber paddles that gently will swipe and remove the hair. Then the hogs are hung on a rail, and we actually use a torch to burn or singe any remaining hair, and then we do a couple washes to make the skin as clean and smooth as possible.
And I think we'll end there and over to Jim, and then we'll start talking with. We will have this picture online as well. So we are going to video and then talk over to you. All right, see you in a second.
We're on. We're on. Yes.
What I wanted to illustrate is the most important tool in the kitchen is a thermometer, an Insta-Read thermometer. These are about $15. And what I did today was I cooked 2 of the same chops, same thickness. One, I cooked at 165, which used to be the internal temperature that the USDA recommended that you cook for. That has changed, and we now cook it to 145 degrees with a 3-minute rest. So if that's all you did, and just seasoned it with salt and pepper. So cooking it properly, and then simple seasonings, you're gonna end up with some delicious pork. And a lot of people get a little freakish about, see, look at the difference between juices that run here versus your grandmother's, where she cooked it for 3 hours and then cooked it for another hour because she was afraid you were gonna get worms.
And tell us, Jim, what temperatures were these two pork chops?
This
cooked
one
to?
was
Rib chops?
165,
Say that again.
165,
Yeah.
and this one here was 145 with a 3-minute rest. Rosy, pink center, juicy, tasty.
So what you're seeing on the one that was cooked to 145, hopefully you can see this, or 165, right, is it looks like kind of leatherish, right? It looks like pieces of shoe leather or shoestrings, really stringy. You can see all these little lines, and if you touch it, it's hard and dry. Conversely, if we look at the pork chop that was cooked to 145 degrees, it looks smooth. You don't see any lines. It looks a little pink, and it definitely looks wetter. And the reason that it looks a little bit pink is because the color that makes meat red, which is called myoglobin, when that protein is cooked and heated, it'll turn brown, which is called denaturing, which is similar to what happens when you cook an egg. So a little bit of pink is actually okay because it means that some of that myoglobin has been denatured, but not all of it. The pork chop that was cooked to 165, all of that myoglobin got converted, and so it's very, very gray. And the other protein, which is actually most important, is also denatured during different cooking temperatures. So that protein is called myosin. So it's a contractile protein, or myofibrillar protein. And when you cook to really high temperatures, myofibrillar proteins, especially in pork, they lose a lot of water and they dry out, and the proteins start to harden. And that's why pork, when cooked to a high temperature, is when we consume it, it's dry, tough, and even chewy. When we cook to a lower temperature, less of those myofibrillar proteins are denatured, and because of that, they can hold on to more moisture, and it results in more juicy, flavorful pork, which is a much better eating experience.
Once again, this is referring to full muscle loin, so pork chops. You don't really want to cook your pork shoulder to, if you're barbecuing it, you don't want to cook it to 145 degrees because it wouldn't have time to break down those proteins and the collagen that's inside of it. So.
Section today, these guys are being very serious. You're not sending the wonderful juices and the world. But trust us, it's good stuff. And probably the biggest lesson of all things tonight that you can take home with you is to push forward to 145. No more. So we have Jim Magolski with us. He's online, and he's going to start the next conversation as it relates to evaluation in terms of value. And so we've got a poster here we're going to show. So Jordan is our camera master. And so we have a poster that we prepared to kind of help Jim start the next section. And so thanks, Jim, for being on with us tonight. Jim works for Perdue Farms, and as well as being super active in our Wisconsin Pork Association, serving many years as past president. So I'm going to ask for you, Jim, mute myself on my end here, or at least it's quiet, please be quiet. And if you want to begin.
And I think I heard the end of that, Bernie. So I appreciate the opportunity, and thank you, Dr. Sindelar and Jim and Bernie for the time and going through the carcass and talking about differences in quality, and certainly, you know, one of the most important topics in terms of cooking temperature and ultimate cooking temperature at 145 with a 3-minute rest. So one of the things that I get the opportunity to talk about, in wasn't that many years ago, I was sitting in many of your shoes in the livestock program and swine program, and have had the opportunity to go to grad school and learn more about meat science and muscle biology, and then had the opportunity to work with Perdue Foods here for about the last 10 years. You know, when Bernie walked through this evening in terms of the carcass contest, which is something many of you are probably familiar with at your county fair, you know, when we rib the carcass between the 10th and 11th rib and measure the loin eye area, measure the fat depth, collect the carcass weight to determine a percent lean. You know, that is certainly something we're all familiar with the county fair, you know, strategy and evaluation. Think for a moment, the pork industry, so a very large industry within the U.S. and across the world, processes approximately 475,000 pigs each and every workday. It equates to about 2.5 million hogs every week that enter our food chain for consumption. And with that, we determine, how do you determine value of those carcasses? And what Bernie showed and what Dr. Sindelar showed and what we do at our carcass shows, actually when we split between the 10th and 11th rib, we actually cut in half the loin primal. And so in a larger packing plant, that carcass stays intact as it goes through the chilling process and then goes through the breakdown on the carcass on the cut side of the plant, which in the commodity system, it's about 24 hours of chill, and then that animal goes through the cut floor breakdown into the primals that Jim Murray showed you, and then into a box and to the retail center or to the food service system. In the industry, if you think about how you buy pork or how you consume pork at home, you don't buy equal portions of the carcass in which everyone walked through tonight. You might buy more bacon, you might buy more sausage, you know, probably ham a few times over the holiday season and a little bit of lunch meat. But each of those consumer habits changes the value of each of the pieces of the hog. And if we think about just walking through the diagram that's being shown here, if we start with a 290-pound pig, so your county fair pig weighs 290 pounds. When it goes through the harvest process and gets to a carcass, it's going to weigh about 215 pounds. Pigs, you know, give or take, will be about a 74, 75% yield, which means 74% of the live weight will be the carcass weight. And then from there, after we chill it, we're going to break it down into all the primals and pieces that they walk through on the table. And you can see the breakdown in the chart there, that the blade, or what we call the picnic, and then the Boston butt make up about 21% of the weight of the carcass. Get to the center of the animal, the loin is about 25% of the weight, the spare ribs about 4%, the belly or the side about 16%, and the ham about 24%. Because of supply and demand, and because we consume as customers in the U.S. and across the world, we consume different proportions of those pieces. Each one of those primals has a different value. Today, for instance, the belly is the most valuable piece of the carcass on a per pound basis. Then goes to the ribs, the back rib, then to the blade or the Boston butt, and then the loin. Those are in proportion the most valuable pieces of the carcass. But as Jim had mentioned, every piece of the carcass has a home. And kind of the old joke was we can consume everything on the pig except the squeal. And where that becomes valuable is all those other pieces that were on the table and shown even through the harvest process. There are customers around the world that have a demand or have a desire for those pieces. So we talk about today, there's about 2.5 million hogs that go to market every week. About 30% of that total product leaves the U.S. shores and goes to a consumer somewhere in a different part of the world. For instance, hams, the U.S. sends a lot of hams to Mexico. It's a very lean product, very little fat, high lean, fits their culture and cooking method very well. Feet, front feet, hind feet. I know there were some questions on intestines, internal organs. All of those have different customers around the globe. And certainly even in the U.S. market, we're starting to see pet treats and some of those other, components start to use some of those pieces of the carcass as well. And where that becomes important is as we become a global industry, and each of you see this potentially if you've taken a pig to your local sale barn, you might be signing off on an affidavit that you haven't used Paline, for example. And something that the extension team and through our counties have worked extensively on is a lot of export customers or customers around the world have different preferences of product, which allows and creates different niches or different objectives that our producers need to raise livestock to in order to be able to export to other parts of the world. Paline is one of them that certainly is a tool in the U.S. that allows a pig to be leaner, potentially a little more efficient in the late stages of marketing. But a lot of customers have chosen and decided through regulation that is not what they want in from a consumption standpoint. And in a lot of export countries, we cannot use that product. On the flip side, we have customers that demand a higher value product or a higher quality product. And you saw with the different loins, there's variances or differences in the color and in the marbling of loin products or of loins. And typically, the darker the product, the more fat the animal has or intermuscular fat or marbling, the higher valued it is. Better eating experience, juicier, more flavorful, etc. And those tend to be exported to higher value markets such as Japan and Korea and so forth that have a preference for some really high eating experience. And that's what creates different markets and different opportunities and for you, different value to your animals. And as we split out between how we sell our animal at a carcass show at a fair for a set price or X dollars a pound, compared to if you take that animal to equity and go through the commercial market, value is created by how our consumers, desire and want to purchase that product. So with that, when there was a few questions on how many pounds of meat come out of a pig. So in this example, about a 290-pound pig will produce about 144 pounds of retail product. So way on the bottom there, it's a little bit hard to read, but a 290-pound pig will yield about 144 pounds of product that goes to the grocery store. Why is that important? Well, if you think about the price that the consumer pays, right? That's always something that is important in terms of our customer is what is the price at the store. You got to think about what I paid for the animal, and I've got about half of the pounds left to actually sell. Not to mention, not all of those pounds are worth the same. You don't want to pay the same for a blade steak or a shoulder steak as you do a piece of tenderloin or a piece of bacon or belly. And so we get differences in value created by the fact that we got about half of the live weight that we can go to the customer and sell. So if you have a customer at your county fair and they ask, well, if I buy your pig, how many pounds will I have left to take home from the butcher shop? You can use this chart here that's part of tonight's presentation. 74% of the live weight will be the carcass weight. That's typically what they pay for to get processed. And then of that carcass weight, they will have about 67% of the animal in take-home product. So with that, I don't know if Dr. Sindelar or Jim or Bernie have anything to add there, but certainly these differences in genetics and nutrition and management all play a fact into how much fat an animal has, and certainly, the color and marbling and quality of that animal, and in turn changes the value of that to our consumers.
As we round out the pork carcass evaluation session in food safety here this evening, I'd like to make sure you're aware of our Animal Sciences Virtual Education Series webpage. It is the Go Whisk link that was shared in all of the email correspondence you would have received on the Zoom this evening. There are, again, the link to register for a session. So we've got a few future sessions coming up. And then the recordings of the sessions, if you click on this, it will open up to what is our YouTube channel for the Wisconsin Youth Livestock Program page. So you can see that there's already a few in here from this year. And then you can also go through the videos and other playlists from the virtual series in 2021 and also in 2020. You can see the January 13 session information, that's all here. The February session, which was on precision agriculture. The January one was on animal health and welfare. And then of course, this evening's session, all the information, which is quite a bit, is all viewed here. A special kind of note here, there is a food safety video from the Wisconsin Beef Council related to one of our meat processors here in the Southwest Wisconsin area in Cuba City, Weber's Meat Processing. And if you go to that food safety video from the Wisconsin beef producers, they will be sharing quite a bit about in relation to how food safety is managed in our small and mid-sized local processors, as well as other key things that are important in being able to provide consumers a wholesome product. So that's there for you to review. We've got some other pieces here that are in relation to what Jim talked about. Here's the USDA pork carcass cutout that you could receive more information on. And then we've also got a swine live selection PDF that you can look at, as well as a pork carcass evaluation PDF. And one more reminder, please do fill out the evaluation after you review the session this evening. And this just helps us, again, as we've shared before, be able to evaluate what y'all have learned and gained from these experiences. And then also, if you have any other great insight of some future topics that you'd like to have covered. One last thing as we leave tonight, we really want to make sure many of you who have perhaps found meat and food safety as somewhat of an interesting topic for you, or something that you want to gain more information about. There certainly is many careers and many opportunities for you to gather and gain information and awareness of what types of careers are available in the food industry. And so we always say there's many careers and there's lots of opportunities because people need to eat, and there's lots of things, right? Lots of types of foods that people can eat. And so there's kind of a little bit of job security if you're interested in this area. And so let's click on this link here. And this is a PDF that was created by a group of folks that are involved in the meat industry, as well as our Department of Agriculture, our UW-Madison folks in terms of Jeff Sindelar and others that put this page together that kind of helps illustrate the whole vast components that come about from being engaged or interested in the meat and food industry. And so as you can see, this spectrum wheel on the top here has lots of aspects of animal care, animal welfare, to biomedical ways of being involved in this industry. Culinary is a fun and neat, interesting part of our industry, creating new types of ice cream or new types of cheese or new types of meat salami or sausages are all great ways to get engaged in this area. So as you can see, scrolling down here, there's kind of sub-segments of the industry that's kind of been portrayed through this handout. And you can certainly Google or go on YouTube by clicking, or not clicking, I'm sorry, it's not an active PDF, but you can do that by just typing in some of these job titles and learn more about what they would be doing in this role. So you can gain more information to see if this is something you're interested in. So please review this site, take some time thinking about that. Many of you are looking to graduate from school soon. Some of you are thinking about what kind of classes you want to take in high school for next year, and this might aid you in being able to pick some classes that might interest you for a longer term career. So that is pretty much our evening. Just a reminder, we have the grand challenges in April that are concentrated on land and water. And then in May, we'll be talking about biomedical advancements. Again, if you're interested in making sure that you want to get some educational verification points, if you're showing and selling at local county fairs, here's the link to that form. And then, of course, if you have any questions, please do email me, and I can certainly assist you wherever possible. Don't forget to hand out or to fill out that survey. And it's been great to have you here this evening. Looking forward to seeing you in April and May. Take care.